Hello, this is a BICOM podcast. I'm Richard Pater, the director of BICOM, based in Jerusalem, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Sima Shine and discuss various issues around Iran. For those that don't know, Sima Shine is currently the head of the Iranian program at the Institute for National Security Studies, the INSS. Before that, Sima had an extensive career in Israeli intelligence, including heading up the research division of the Mossad. After leaving the Mossad, she also served as the deputy head of strategic affairs in Israel's National Security Council and director general of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, where she was also focused largely on Iran. So Sima, thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So if we can start, and I think kind of the main reason why I wanted to talk to you today was that we've seen over the last week or two a series of mysterious explosions inside Iran, perhaps most significantly in Natanz. If we can start with that, what can you tell us about those incidents?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that you understand that everything I'm saying is from open sources, even though my career was in a different places, you know. So I would say that I believe there is no connection between most of the events that we saw in the last 4 to 5 events that we saw in the last 2 weeks. The last one in Natanz, of course, is a very important one and a very significant one, since it has destroyed almost, I assume, most of the building of the place where the Iranians were combining the more advanced centrifuge. Now, this is a very important part in their nuclear program, since Iran is, for many years, is enriching with a very old type of centrifuge, what is called the IR-1. Not that this type cannot bring them to a bomb, of course it can, but but in this case they need a lot of centrifuge, they need it will take much more time. So it was very important for Iran, and therefore they were insisting on, in the dialogue on the JCPOA, to make sure that they are allowed to continue R&D on the more advanced one. So, one of the steps, since they decided a year ago to leave the JCPOA, they didn't call it leaving the JCPOA, but steps that are out of the JCPOA. One of them was changing the schedule that was in the agreement on advanced centrifuge. And from that point of view, they were today much more advanced than they ought to be according to the agreement. And this assembly place is a very important part in the program and in the schedule of the program for the coming years. Who did it, I don't know. The Iranians didn't mention, the Iranians, I mean the official Iranians, not the press or something like that. The any official didn't mention if it's the US, if it's Israel, if it's Saudi Arabia, if it's any kind of opposition group or something like that. They have said that they know now exactly how it happened, and they will not reveal it because of secret elements of the issue, and they don't want to make known to the public. So the question is who did it, but that's not important. What important is the significance of the event to the schedule of the Iranian nuclear program, and that is rolling back one element. There are other elements, of course, but one element, important one. It's rolling back for, I don't know how long, but probably many months.
Do we know what type of centrifuges they were in there?
From what I understand, there were several types. They are working on IR4, RIS6, and RI8. So yeah, probably the two last, the 6 and the 8 were there. I read a lot of speculation about what does it mean, the IR8. Somewhere I read that it can enrich 50 times more. That's not accurate. I assume it can enrich more than the IR1, the current one, 10 times more or something like that, which is of course very, very high, very important.
So you mentioned this is just kind of one aspect of the JCPOA that they are of their project that they are advancing. How else, since the US have pulled out, kind of taking a general view, or kind of other aspects of it, what else have they been improving? Where else do you see their overall nuclear project be this time?
Yeah, so Iran for a year, we are now celebrating 2 years since Trump decided to leave the agreement. So for a year, Iran decided not to do anything and was trying to see if they can get the benefits of the agreement through the Europeans, the Russians, the Chinese, without the Americans. After a year, they understood that they are paying a high price and high economic price, and they decided to start gradually to distance themselves from the agreement. They did it in a cautious way. Every 60 days, they had another step. Now they are actually, I think we can say, except for the inspection that is still according to the agreement, all the other steps, the amount of enriched uranium that is in Iran had to be according to the agreement, 300 kilograms. We have today more than 1,500. They had to operate only one site in Natanz, and they stopped enriching in Fordow. Now they are also enriching in Fordow, so they are enriching in 2 places. They were limited by the agreement to 3.67% of enrichment. They are today enriching around 5%, and they are threatening to go to another stage by enriching to 20%. As I said at the beginning, they are working on a new different schedule on the advanced centrifuge. They had to be doing it very slowly. They are doing it now rapidly. So actually, most of the elements of the JCPOA, they are violating them, except, as I said, the inspection, which they are also threatening now to breach it. They don't say exactly what is the red line, but they are giving some hints that what happened in Natanz previous week is kind of a red line. And of course, what will happen in the Security Council with the embargo issue and with the snapback might bring them also to violate the inspection, either to stop their cooperation with the IAEA according to the additional protocol, or even minimizing the inspection according to the JCPOA. And some of them are, officials are threatening also to leave the NPT. So there is a list of steps that they can do in the coming weeks, months.
And of course, outside the remit of the JCPOA is any of their development of ballistic weapons. We saw a month or 2 ago that they successfully, for the first time, launched a satellite, which is, my understanding, similar technology of the ICBMs. Do you have an assessment of how successful that is and how significant that development is?
First of all, I completely agree with you that once we are talking about the nuclear issue, we should immediately talk about the missiles, since this is the delivery system, and it has to be in any future agreement. If there will be a future agreement, these 2 issues have to be connected. Yeah, Iran is quite advancing and advanced already on the missile issue. They have also the ICBMs. They have other kinds of missiles, short range, medium range, and they are working on the long one. The satellite that you have mentioned is, of course, could be part of missile ICBM, but what they tried to tell everyone is that this is a kind of a satellite that would be in the orbit and a kind of an intelligence satellite. We think that, as far as we know, that the element of the cameras and all the other elements that are for surveillance are less developed, and the real aim of that was to try and see the first and second stage of launching ICBM.
You mentioned, I mean, this is almost a 2-year anniversary since the US pulled out of the JCPOA, and kind of replacing it is, according to at least the US Secretary of State, Pompeo's maximum pressure campaign. How successful do you think that doctrine has been?
You see, this is an important question, but a difficult answer. Why is it difficult? Because if you measure the maximum pressure from the point of view of how much pressure it has put on the Iranian state and on the Iranian population and on the regime, no question that it is successful. From the point of view of a very, very difficult economic situation in Iran, it's not only sanctions, but it's also the oil price, the low oil prices. It's also, of course, the system, the structure, the economic structure, the corruption, everything. But on top of all of this, the sanctions are very heavy and very effective. But the problem is that that was not the aim of the maximum pressure. The aim was to bring Iran to the negotiating table and to have a new agreement, a better agreement, as it was proclaimed. But unfortunately for the US, Iran is not coming to the table, and I assume will not come at most until the elections in the US and until they see who will be winning the next elections, whether it is Trump or Biden. So I think from that point of view, if we are judging the maximum pressure from the point of view of what was the purpose of this policy, I think the purpose was not achieved. Pressure is very difficult on Iran, very harsh, but and on top of everything, there is the coronavirus that Iran is suffering more than any country in the region. But all of that together, and also the killing of Soleimani and everything that has happened in the last year, all of that together didn't bring Iran to start negotiations or to meet Trump, that is suggesting to them every second day to meet and to have a better agreement and success.
You mentioned just before about October, when the arms embargo is due to expire. How do you see that playing out? Will it be renewed? What should we be looking out for there?
Well, as you mentioned, Pompeo talking about it, no question that the American administration is putting a major pressure on the members of the Security Council to continue with the embargo in an unlimited time. Even I heard that there were some suggestions coming from the E3 about half a year prolongation or a year. The American administration is talking about unconditional continuation of the embargo, and they have already put a kind of a draft in the Security Council, but it looks that this will not work. Russia and China have announced that they will veto this draft. I think that direction is a very problematic one. But the issue is that the American administration is threatening that once it doesn't work, they will go to a more dramatic step, which is the snapback, which here we have a huge problem. On one hand, they are not anymore in the JCPOA. On the other hand, they say once they use the fact that the Security Council has a resolution 2231 that adopted the nuclear agreement and has put also some limits on Iran. One of them is the possibility of a snapback of the sanctions if one of the parties to the agreement says that the other is not completing with the agreement, and there is no veto possibility for anyone in this case. This is a political question. The point of view of how to do it On one hand, the Russians are telling everyone and sent a letter to the general director of the UN to tell him that that the US is not anymore in the agreement, so there is no step that they can do according to the agreement. So there is a huge problem here. The question is, at the end of the day, how will Europe react to that? We hear the Europeans saying that they are against snapback. They are trying to preserve the JCPOA in any way, even though it actually does not exist anymore, not from the Iranian side and not from the American one, but all sides are continuing, except for the Americans, all sides are continuing to talk about the preservation of the JCPOA. So it is a huge problem that we will face in the months of September, October, till the 3rd of November. I don't see how we get out of this very problematic situation, because I don't think the Europeans are in a stage of supporting the Americans, even without the Russians and the Chinese that are completely against it. I don't think the Europeans are able to support the snapback. So it is a huge political problem.
I mean, what advice would you be giving to any UK officials listening, or generally to the E3 leadership of what they should be doing on this?
So for a long time, I was thinking that Europe, and especially Britain, with its special relations with the US, could try and bring any kind of a compromise that will bring also the Iranians as well as the Americans. I don't believe it's possible anymore, and I think the political environment in Washington would not allow any compromise. That is an issue that there are so many other problems. The only one that they would not want to play into the hands of opponents is to say that they have compromised on the Iranian issue. And the same is on the Iranian side. In February, we had elections to parliament in Iran. Most of the seats were taken by more conservative and radical members. So the atmosphere in Tehran as well is a very radical, very anti-American, anti-Western, and I don't see a possibility for compromise. So I really don't know how Europe and Britain particularly can improve this very complicated situation that we are facing.
So from the Israeli perspective, obviously the Iranian nuclear file is one concern. The other concerning behavior of Iran is their regional activity. And when it comes to Syria, broadly speaking, there are three areas of concern: of transferring advanced weapons, of the upgrading of basic rockets to the precision-guided missiles, and also expanding the terror infrastructure, particularly on the Syrian side of the Golan. In the recent weeks and months, how do you assess the current ambitions and projects of the Iranians on these fronts?
I would say that this is perhaps in a way a paradox. In spite of all the problems that the Iranians do have, we have mentioned the sanctions and the severe economic situation, the coronavirus, the killing of Soleimani, all the event with the Ukraine airplane. I mean, so many problems and such a difficult situation. I think, except for the Iran-Iraq war, I don't think they have suffered such a problematic and difficult situation. In spite of all of that, we don't see a change in the main interest of Iran to continue and be involved in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and in Yemen. We might see here and there the changing of numbers of soldiers, but most of the soldiers are Shia militias, are not Iranians for a long time. And what we see is a very continuing and big effort of the Iranians not only to concentrate on the military side, but also to penetrate to the economic field in Syria, and as well as to the civil one, the education one. We see a lot of new militias that they are establishing, and they are planning for long term And I really think we don't have a good answer to that. We have an answer, we have a partial answer. And as everybody knows, Israel from time to time is hacking in Syria, is trying to strike if there is a good information about arms deliveries or any building of plants for missiles. But that's a first of all, it's a partial solution, and in any case, it relates only to the military side and not to the economic, educational one, religious one, all the other spheres that Iran is penetrating in Syria to stay for long time there.
And do you think, I mean, in the past, I think we've spoken about the idea of trying to create some space between the interests of the Iranians and the Russians in Syria. How do you assess that relationship at the moment, and can that division policy work?
I think there are divisions between Russia and Iran, but they are not enough in order to make a real problem between those two countries. They need each other. Of course, Iran needs Russia much more than Russia needs Iran, but in the case of Syria, still the situation is not calm, and I assume the Russians understand that they don't have any possibility to make the Iranians leave Syria, and they would prefer to see less Iranian military involvement in Syria, but they cannot do it. And I think for the long run, they are competing in some fields, in the economic one, also when it relates to penetrating into the security forces, army, nomination of people, of commanders and others. So we see from time to time problems arising between Russia and Iran, but that is not something that will ruin the relations. As you know, there is the Astana channel, political Astana channel, that Iran, Turkey, and Russia are trying to handle the Syria situation. There are also problems between Iran and Turkey. They have different interests in Syria, but still it's important for Iran to have an open dialogue with Turkey, so they continue to preserve the relations with Turkey as they are preserving the relations with Russia, which they of course need much more even. So I don't think the split, we can split between them. I know we have been talking a lot about that, but in spite of all the problems, they still need each other and find a way how to accommodate.
One last question, looking at the Israeli not domestic scene, but in terms of policy, we've got a new defense minister, Benny Gantz. Have you noticed any, when it comes to Syria and Iran, have you noticed any distinction between the new defense minister as opposed to Naftali Bennett?
You know, at the end of the day, there is the army is the one who gives puts the ideas before the defense minister. I don't think there is a common interest between the defense minister and the chief of staff. So I don't think that a different defense minister would do things in Syria or in Lebanon differently. I think there is no big difference. The only thing is that some days before Naftali Bennett left his office, he was talking about expelling the Iranians are getting out of Syria, which of course is not the situation. Probably trying to have a kind of achievement before leaving, but generally speaking, it's more of the same.
Well, Sima, thank you very much for all of that. That was incredibly interesting and very, very useful. Most appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.